Many owners have seen this happen. Their dog suddenly stands up. Maybe the ears perk forward. Maybe the tail starts moving. Maybe the dog is already walking toward the door, and yet nobody has said a word. No command, no leash, no invitation. Sometimes all it takes is reaching for a jacket, or standing up from a chair, or taking a few steps toward another room. And somehow your dog already seems to know that something is about to happen. Most people assume there must have been a signal, but if you never actually gave one, why is your dog already reacting? Most people assume the signal is a word: walk, outside, let's go. And on the surface, that seems perfectly reasonable. After all, the dog becomes excited right after hearing it. So it is easy to conclude that the word caused the reaction, but sometimes the timing tells a different story. Some dogs are already watching more closely before the word is spoken. They may stand up, move toward the door, or suddenly seem more alert. What many owners notice first is the command. What they often miss is everything that happened a few moments earlier, and that small detail may change the way this behavior looks entirely. What many people miss is that a single event may not be what their dog is watching. A jacket by itself may not mean much. Keys by themselves may not mean much. Even shoes may not mean much. But when those things begin happening in a familiar order, the picture starts to change. Maybe you close your laptop, push your chair back, walk toward the hallway, pick up your keys, then reach for your jacket. One small event leads to another, and after seeing the same sequence again and again, many dogs begin paying attention to the pattern rather than any single moment. Or maybe more accurately, they learn that certain things tend to happen together, and that may be where the reaction really begins. This is why some dogs seem to know what is about to happen before anyone says a word. By the time the command arrives, the process may already be underway. Several small clues may have appeared first, and sometimes you can see this quite clearly. A person picks up their keys, the dog's head lifts, the ears become more attentive, the dog watches closely. Then nothing happens. The person sits back down, and for a few moments, the dog may continue waiting. That reaction is interesting because if the keys were the entire signal, the expectation should disappear immediately. But in many cases, the dog may be waiting for something else: the next movement, the next sound, the next piece of a familiar sequence. And that suggests the reaction may be bigger than any single clue on its own. At this point, an interesting question starts to emerge. When your dog reacts before a walk, is he responding to one signal, or is he putting several signals together? Researchers studying dog cognition have explored something similar. In studies looking at how dogs anticipate human actions, researchers found evidence that dogs may develop expectations about what a person is likely to do next. In other words, dogs may not always be responding to a single cue in isolation. They may be paying attention to how events connect to one another, and that fits surprisingly well with what many owners see at home. Because by the time you reach for a leash, put on a jacket, or say a familiar word, your dog may already have been collecting information for several seconds, perhaps even longer. The reaction we notice is often the final moment, but the expectation may have started much earlier as the pattern quietly unfolded. What makes this even more interesting is that most of these patterns are not created intentionally. We create them without thinking. The same route through the house every morning, the same routine before leaving, the same order of small actions at the end of the day. Over time, those moments begin repeating so consistently that they become part of the environment itself. And dogs are often paying attention to details we barely notice anymore: a hand reaching toward a shelf, a bag being picked up, a light being turned off, a familiar sound from another room. None of these things seem important on their own. Yet, when they happen in the same way day after day, they can become surprisingly reliable clues. And before long, what started as ordinary habits may begin to look like rituals from your dog's point of view. This is often the moment when those routines become visible, not when they are working, but when they suddenly change. A new work schedule, a move to a different home, a vacation, retirement, or even a family member leaving the house at different times than usual. At first, the changes may seem small, but from the dog's perspective, many familiar clues have disappeared. The sequence no longer unfolds the way it normally does, And sometimes the dog responds to that uncertainty. You may notice more watching, more waiting, more following from room to room. Some dogs seem a little less settled than usual. In many cases, the dog has not suddenly become needy or difficult. The environment has simply become harder to predict, and that difference matters more than it may seem. This can be especially important for dogs that tend to be more anxious or sensitive to change. That does not mean life needs to follow a strict schedule. In fact, most dogs handle small variations quite well, but many dogs seem to benefit when at least some parts of the day remain predictable. A familiar morning routine, a familiar evening routine, the same quiet activities before bedtime, small things that help the dog understand what is likely to happen next. And sometimes that understanding reduces uncertainty, not because the routine itself is magical, but because predictable patterns can make the environment feel easier to navigate. For some dogs, confidence grows from excitement and exploration. For others, it grows from knowing what to expect. And that may be one reason simple daily routines can matter more than they appear. Today, try watching your dog a little differently, not when you give the command, a few moments before. Pay attention to the exact point where the reaction begins. Does it happen when you say the word? Or does it happen when you stand up? When you close your laptop? When you reach for your keys? You can even try a small experiment. Put on your shoes, pick up your keys, then sit back down and wait. Notice whether your dog remains alert. Notice whether he keeps watching. Notice whether he seems to be expecting something else to happen next. The answer may reveal more than you expect. Because many dogs are not simply reacting to a command, they are following a sequence that has quietly repeated hundreds of times before. And once you begin noticing those patterns yourself, many everyday behaviors start looking a little different, perhaps a little easier to understand.